Recently, I made a video about the 9 strongest Adderall alternatives that has almost gained 100,000 views. And the one question that I would get asked the most was, what is the best alternative? What is better than the rest? What is the highest upside for the lowest downside? And that is what we're gonna talk about in this video. Well, the best is gonna vary just because people vary, so what works for somebody won't work for somebody else. That being said, there are 3 compounds that work for the vast majority of people to great effect. So the first one is phenylpiracetam, which I've talked about at length on this channel, which is regular piracetam with an extra phenyl group so it can cross the blood-brain barrier and impact cognition directly. What makes this compound very interesting is that it can perfectly mimic a lot of amphetamine's effects with the euphoria, the sense of confidence, the dialed in tunnel vision focus. I would always recommend phenylpiracetam to my friends in my personal life if they had ADHD or anything like that, because I knew for sure it was the one that was gonna work, that almost everybody gets strong effects from it, so I would always recommend it. It's gonna give you quick and potent effects just because it acts as a norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor, as well as being an A4B2 nicotinic receptor partial agonist and increasing alpha brainwaves. Usually this euphoria comes from this adrenic component because if you think about it, a lack of adrenic activity is implicated in depression, and that's why serotonin and norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors are often prescribed to treat that. For dosing, there's 2 sides of the same coin with phenylpiracetam, where some people notice rapid tolerance buildup, so they only use it 1 to 2 times a week, where other people just take a lower dose every day and they do find the effects diminish slightly, except they still kind of maintain as they go about it. And that does make sense because if you think about it, it is a prescribed medication in Russia, prescribed for daily use. So it would make sense that it would be okay for daily use. You can take it subliminally for stronger effects. Usually the dosage range is between 50 milligrams to 200 to even 300 milligrams. After that, it's kind of diminishing returns. Cosmic Nootropic is the best place to buy the capsules, and then the best place to buy the powder is science.bio. And if you are enjoying this video, please consider subscribing. It's very safe, been around for decades. Even so, it was originally formulated for Russian astronauts to perform under pressure. It is a banned substance in athletic competitions via WADA, and there are analogs to this where there's phenylpiracetam hydrazide, which is supposed to be smoother and more potent, so a stronger effect at a lower dose. There's RGPU95, which is supposed to be more GABAergic, and then there's methylphenylpiracetam with a methylated group, which is supposed to be a sigma-1 agonist. Seems very interesting, very dopaminergic, except it seems impossible to procure just because it's tough to synthesize. So it might be a compound that seems great on paper, except doesn't turn out to anything in real life. Bromantane. If phenylpiracetam is a river, bromantane is a stream, in that it is more subtle and soft effects, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because it can be good to just have your baseline a bit elevated for the betterment. Nothing too crazy. They don't feel like you're on anything, except just elevated enough that you feel good. You feel like the best self, but you don't feel like a different self, if that makes sense. Because oftentimes you take Adderall, you take amphetamine, and you become a different person. You become a zombie, you lose your emotions, all of that stuff, except if you can just have an elevated baseline where you can get a lot of those positive subjective effects from something like Adderall. Originally prescribed for neuroasthenia in Russia, it upregulates the enzymes tyrosine hydroxylase and dopamine decarbolase, upregulating your dopamine system so that you produce more dopamine naturally. And these effects last semi-permanently, most likely due to the GDNF increase, and it also simultaneously upregulates GABA, leading to a smoother effect in that it primarily affects dopamine and GABA. It is a triad of positive effects, and that's non-addictive, non-tolerance building, and there's no withdrawal. And you know, if this compound is so good, why don't you hear about it more? Well, simply because it originates from Russia. No, I'm not kidding, that's simply it. Oftentimes in the Western world, they kind of put all the Russian pharmaceuticals, they kind of push it off the table and ignore it and just pretend they don't exist just because it originates from Russia. Crazily. That being said, it is currently getting approved in the United States for treating a specific type of kidney disease. In my life, I found it was great for periods of work where I have a lot of stuff to do and I just really have to have my nose to the book and I just have to be very productive. And I can take something like this where I don't feel like I have to pay the tax later, right? Where if I take Adderall to do a bunch of work, it's great in that work period, but afterwards I'm gonna have to pay the price for that. With Bromantane, it's not the case in that after taking it, you just feel an afterglow, which lasts a couple weeks after, which is nice and is good. That being said, I wouldn't want to take it every day just because it makes me a bit too manic in that I'm a bit too impulsive, I'm a bit too euphoric, I'm a bit too confident, a bit too talkative. I just have all those classic symptoms of mania and it's a little bit hard for me to implement into my daily routine, except it's great for periods of work and that's just my experience. A lot of people can take it daily and just notice a subtle boost. In official publications, it is prescribed under this name Latestin, typically at 25 milligrams, except people nowadays dose it between 5 milligrams to 100 milligrams. So it kind of just depends on the individual. You can take it intranasally to potentiate the effects, so a stronger effect from a lower dose and even maybe some other extra ancillary effects. Except you don't have to. It can be good, but you don't have to. A lot of people get strong effects from the powder or just the liquid or so, and you can take those subliminally as well and get even stronger effects. So it just depends what you prefer. For safety wise, it is fairly safe. It was a prescribed medication for good reason, so it has to hit a few safety markers. That being said, there is one study that showed that high doses of bromantane could increase the precursor to one of the beta amyloid plaques, except there's a few things wrong with this study. First off, they're just trying to find the LD, so the lethal dose. So what's the highest dose that somebody can take without experiencing adverse effects? And so with this dose, they gave it to mice, and a human equivalent would be 3.4 grams of bromantane when it's usually dosed at 25 milligrams. So that's a first red flag. And so it's a really high dose that no one would ever really take. They always say the dose is in the poison. Well, there you go. As well as the amyloid plaque hypothesis of the pathology of Alzheimer's disease and all those neurodegenerative diseases has turned out to be false, right? Like if you saw the study that came out last year, it turns out they forged the documents, they manipulated the science, they were dishonest with the results. You can buy it from science.bio for the powder or the solution, or you can buy it from Everychem for the nasal spray. There are other drugs in the adamantane family like bromantane. One of them is amantadine, which increases dopamine synthesis, dopamine release, and is a dopamine reuptake inhibitor, which actually has equal efficacy to treating ADHD to methylphenidate concerta, which is kind of shocking and kind of interesting. Moda or modafinil. This is a compound originally prescribed for narcolepsy that the movie Limitless was based off of, that a wealth of people use for treating their ADHD. If you look on Reddit, you will see anecdote after anecdote that it was the one thing that would replace their ADHD prescription to great effect because it can be very good. Even with studies showing its efficacy on par with ADHD medication, it primarily works by keeping you alert by stimulating the histamine system and downstream the orexin system, which is very important for your wakefulness levels, as well as it is a weak dopamine and norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor, which also increases your alertness. Then it has some secondary benefits like increasing some glutaminergic transmission, being a weak antioxidant, and increasing gap junctions and functions. Say that 3 times fast. In my experience, it absolutely does keep you awake and alert, usually giving you an undercurrent of stimulation for 8 to 12 hours, which is nice. You can function with no sleep, say goodbye to your fatigue, all of that good stuff. I don't take it regularly just because I find it makes me a bit robotic, and on it I'll just forget things that I shouldn't forget. Concepts that I know off heart, like sober, off of modafinil, on it I'll just forget it. I just won't understand anymore, and it's kind of weird. And it's because of those 2 effects that I only take it periodically. That being said, a lot of people take it every day or a couple times a week to great effect, so it just does depend on the person. Usually dosed between 50 to 200 milligrams, with some people even dosing up to 400 milligrams, which has shown to be safe. Going past that isn't really recommended because it's kind of diminishing returns again. It has been shown to be safe for long-term use with surprisingly no tolerance buildup, which is kind of bizarre. There are also some moda alternatives like armodafinil, modafinil, which is supposed to be more dopaminergic and have a longer effect profile. And then there is FL-modafinil, which is supposed to be more potent and have less side effects. Bimoda or online Indian pharmacies for capsules and tablets. For powders and solutions, for analogs and precursors, science.bio is your friend. And if you want to learn about alternative ways to treat ADHD without medication, without synthetic chemicals or drugs, and you want to go more so the natural route, check out this video where I talk about the 7 strongest natural supplements for treating ADHD, backed by science and my personal experience and the community consensus. So that video will just be on the screen right now.